why are dance studios better than learning to dance on YouTube or TikTok? What advice do you have from someone starting dance at any age?
What advice would you have someone who is Googling something about dance and they're just too embarrassed to ask? Welcome back to season 5 of Beyond the Steps presented by Apolla Performance and Turning Point Dance Creations. Today we are talking Dancer 101. All the burning questions that you are Googling, but you're embarrassed to ask. It's all right. We're going to ask. It's cool. We got another fantastic conversation today. Bree, tell everybody who we have joining us.
We are bringing back our friend Kelsey Nelson, and we are going to be talking. We're like Melissa said, we're going to ask her all the things that you want to know that are too afraid to ask. But before that, I want to tell you a little bit about Kelsey in case you guys aren't familiar. She is a brilliant dance educator with over 25 years of experience, ranging from major motion pictures to teaching students all across the globe, judging for several prestigious dance competitions within the United States, and creating her own conditioning program for dancers. Kelsey, what is going on, girl? Like how has everything been? Welcome back. Thank you for being here. All the things.
Yeah, it is. Life is great. Everything's going great. It's been a busy season, and I have got to get into so many different studios this year and work with amazing dancers from all over the country and create and teach and educate. And I just feel really, really grateful for everything that this year has offered me. And I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're teaching a lot more across the country, right? Like you're traveling quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. So I'm traveling quite a bit, but then I also have like 8 to 9 studios that I'm doing monthly residencies with. So I'm getting to go into studios every month and work with them. And it's been really great to be able to create those relationships and connections with the kids in the studios and start to really see how things are starting to change with them, how they're taking class differently, how they're applying corrections to information. So that's been really, really fulfilling this season.
Since we're doing, the basics and dance 101 and answering all those burning questions, let's start by what stirred in you kind of that passion to dance? Did it come early on and naturally, or was it something that you kind of learned to love over time and grew into?
My mom put me in dance when I was like 3, I think. So it was just something I like went to. I also played sports and I did all the other things. And then when I was probably 9, I went and watched my dance teacher's daughter perform at Oklahoma City University, and I watched her tap dance on a dime, and I was like, "I'm gonna go to school here, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna be a professional dancer." And so I decided at like 9 or 10 years old, I was like, "This is something that I really want to do," and then everything changed after that. So I went from a more recreational studio, which gave me the like passion and foundation and love for dance, and transitioned into a competitive studio, and then started taking more ballet and getting really focused in that area to refine technique and prepare myself for college. And then I ended up going to OCU, which was an amazing thing, full circle. And so I think I loved it, but I think it was that performance when I was about 9 or 10 that really, like, flipped a switch for me, and I was like, "This is something I wanna do."
Now, did your mom, I know parents don't always understand, like my parents, they had never danced. They didn't, know I was the oldest child. So like I was the first one going through all of this. And, they did the best they could to like give me what I wanted and what I needed and what I was asking for. And like, did your parents go along with it? And did they go, okay, like, did they pick up guiding you in that, or did you kind of drive that train?
My mom has always been, like, super supportive. At one point, they were driving me an hour and a half each direction to get to dance, and then they ended up selling their house and moving to the town that the dance studio was in, so then my dad was driving to work an hour and a half each direction, so they've definitely been super supportive. My mom learned how to write grants and do all these things to get me funding to be able to train and dance and do all of that, so they definitely were super supportive. When it came to college, they were like, "We're not paying for a dance performance degree." You're like, we've already paid for that thousand times over at this point. And if you don't know how to perform, like we have a problem. And I just so happened to break my foot December of my senior year. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like, what if I can't dance? And so the dance management degree at OCU was like the perfect combination of dancing, but then also learning business and arts management and all that kind of stuff. So it was like the perfect meld. And I wouldn't have done that and pursued that degree if it wouldn't have been for my injury, but also for my parents like pushing me to like explore all angles of the dance industry, which is not something that's always happening nowadays.
So the questions that all of us are double digit year dance educators, directors, on here. So these questions that we are about to answer are pretty basic questions, but they're ones that people want to know. And one of them is, what are dance classes? And that's a huge question, y'all. That's big. That's big. But I think we can break it down to like, what's the format of a dance class? Because it's different by age and by genre, but a format is pretty much standard. So, Kelsey, can you walk us to like the three major parts of a dance class? What do they usually include?
Absolutely. So when it comes to taking a dance class, clearly the goal is to learn movement. And so that can be in any genre, whether that's tap, jazz, ballet, modern, whatever it is. But the three main areas that I think that you need to look for in a dance class is there needs to be a proper warm up. So that's something that's going to kickstart the class, and make sure that your body and your mind are present and prepared to be able to take on the challenges of whatever style it might be. There has to be, in my opinion, a technique portion of class. So, technique, and what I explain to any of my students, is how you do something. So, how you do anything, whether it's how you put your hair in a ponytail to how you make your bed, right? There's a technique that we all use. So, in a dance class, there are techniques to movement and style that need to be developed and taught. So, that's definitely a part of class that needs to exist. And then I also believe that there needs to be space for exploration and development of whatever that genre might be, right? So, whether that's a combo, whether that's improv, whether that's like a partner activity, something where they're getting to explore what that style might feel like and be like in their own bodies. So those are kind of the three like main areas. If I could throw in a fourth, would be like a cool down moment, few minutes at the end to kind of like circle everything back. That's usually the thing that gets cut usually. But it's something that I think is important, and I try to bring back even if we don't physically get that like cool down, just bringing everybody together, talking about the class, what we achieved, celebrating ourselves, each other. So that's kind of how I view what a dance class is.
That's definitely key. I think that all of those are super important. But yeah, those three and even four parts with the cool down are definitely.
Well, and to tack on for anybody, since we're answering these things at a basic fundamental level, there's when Kelsey says genres, we're talking about different, there's a different class for each style of dance. So ballet is a common one that you'll see in the studio environment, jazz, tap, lyrical contemporary as the kids get a little bit older. There's sometimes tumbling, there's African, there's ballroom, there's all kinds of classes that you can take, but every style is going to have generally its own class.
People will say, "Okay, I wanna be a dancer and I wanna learn dance. So how many hours of dance should I take? And do I have to practice at home?" That's a big question too, because the number of hours that you take is based on what you're learning and what type of program you're in, correct?
What's a good starting point for somebody that's looking to pick up dance? How many hours of dance should they take?
I think it varies on age. So if we're just starting out and we're little and we're just learning movement and coordination and those kinds of things, like 1 hour class a week, great. I think that's going to introduce it, and it's going to start to like let your dancer, your child kind of just explore and see if they even like it, right? So if we get beyond that and we're like, okay, we like doing this, I think that adding on more specific, like we're saying, genres, so like an hour ballet class, an hour jazz class, an hour tap class. So kind of starting to separate so each style is getting a little bit more time. When I was teaching at a studio full time, our like competitive 6 and 7 year olds would get 6 hours of class a week, and that included some choreography. So that was class and choreography, and I think that was a great balance for them. So that was like ages 6 to like 8 years old. If you can do a little bit more, you can do a little bit less. I also think it's the quality of education, the quality of classes. So you don't need to be in a dance studio 30 hours a week to be a competitive dancer. You just need to be really intentional with the classes that you're taking and make sure that whatever studio you're at, whether teachers you're taking from are knowledgeable, effective in their teaching. And that is also going to help you get more for the time that you're in the studio and out of the studio.
And two, like, I know one of the questions we came across was, do dancers practice at home a lot? There's also that element of like when you really get deeply involved in something or even not, like there's that, like you should always, yes, like practice it at home because one time a week is not enough, right? So like, yes, you should be practicing those things at home for sure. And that's additional repetition. That's additional, creating that muscle memory that we need as dancers. So
Oh, I was just gonna say it's just like my son, right? Like he does like multiplication and division flashcards at home. We don't spend a lot of time, but we do them so that he like retains that information so he can use that. So it's just like school, right? The kids might get a little homework each week or a little project, something that they're supposed to do. And that's kind of like with dance. The more involved, the more detailed and challenging and elevated it becomes, the more requirement that there's going to probably be for them to put in that additional work to get the results that they're seeking.
I tell parents that are bringing in their 2, 3, 4-year-old, listen, we are teaching them how to stand on the number, take instructions, transition from one thing to the next, like the structure of the class at that point, and learning that that structure is just as important as learning first position at that point. To our answering our first question, that structure of the class is going to travel all the way up until you're an adult. The warm up, the
well, I
technique.
think that's the problem is that, dance has kind of had a spotlight on it. It's not a problem, but that part's great, right? But at the same time, I think people who are on the outside looking in, thanks to social media and other outlets, they think, oh, well, I want to do that too. But they don't realize the amount of time that has gone into what, the ability that they're seeing translated in the video that they're watching, or the amount of training the professionals do on Dancing with the Stars, to get even that job to be on the show. Like yes, it's great to want to emulate that, but you really do have to start at the beginning, laying that foundation, no matter how old you are.
I like use the example of like walking a lot. Like, okay, so how long did it take somebody to learn how to like walk like confidently, right? That didn't just happen in a week or 2 weeks. That's development over a year, 10 months to what, 16 months, maybe even who knows, like to develop the ability to even just take steps. We can't at 2 or 3 or 4 years old be asking them to do a lot beyond that because we're still in that like developmental phase. So I always, yes, yes, motor skills. So I'm like, it's trust the process because if we lay a strong foundation at a young age, then it's going to be very easy to build a skyscraper on top of it, right? But if we don't have that like solid foundation, and not just like physically, but like you said, how are they taking class? Are they able to like hang up their bag, change their shoes, stand, wait their turn in line? All of that is going to translate into all of their other classes as they progress. And then we're going to be able to build on top of that.
All of us clearly have found dance studios, or our parents did at the time when we started, and then we've been in this game for a long time. What are some of the things you think people should consider when they're trying to find a good dance studio near them?
I am huge on culture and like core values. So I highly suggest anybody that's looking for a dance studio, like go on some websites, Google, like look up dance studios in my area, and then go to their websites. Read about the educators, read about their mission, ask if you can come take a sample class to just kind of be able to be in this space and see what's happening, right? How are the teachers interacting with the kids? How are the parents? How are the other kids? The office staff, right? Because even if we're wanting to do this for fun, and I said this last night when I was teaching, we can still also want to be great at it, right? Like we can still want to be really great and just do this because we like doing it. And I think especially with children, we want to put them in a space that is encouraging, positive, supportive. And so you want to find those studios that align with your personal values. So that way you're like on the same path. And what you're trying to reinforce at home is being reinforced in the dance studio and vice versa. And that's going to build that like support system for your dancer, for your children. And right, we all need that, whether we're kids or adults, we need that support system. So the more positive influences that you can find for your kid, I think the better.
I love that you said that because I'm going to jump on a soapbox right now. And the studio with the most kids, the studio with the most titanium, platinum, diamond, glass, crystal, whatever awards, the studio that hired the most celebrity dance people to come in and do their clinics is not necessarily the best place for you and your child. The culture of the studio is so important because especially and even as a parent, because as much time as your kid spends in the studio, you're spending in the waiting room. Or as much time as your child is spending at competition, you're spending it in the dressing room with these other parents and other students or in the auditorium. And you do not want a toxic environment that you can't handle. And toxic for one person might not be toxic for another. Different strokes for different folks. Like it's not all the same. So where everybody I feel like sometimes floods to, oh my God, they have a competition company that's this big and they go to this many competitions and there's hundreds of kids there. That might not a smaller studio might be the place for you because your core values align better with that studio.
Well, and if you're not looking to compete, that emphasis on that might mean that there's not as much of an emphasis on at the recreational level, and so you just have to really, I think, ask yourself what your personal goals are too, right?
People will ask, well, how much does this cost? As a person who's been in the same studio for 21 years, costs are going up. And that totally depends on the area that you're in, right? What city you're in, the cost of living. Rent is very different in a rural area in the Midwest versus Manhattan. Like, and all of those things covered. I don't think people understand that tuition covers the building, the lights, the teachers, the like that stuff is not going to line the pockets of a studio owner. That those are the cost to do that. So, I mean, I think that, I've heard as low like a 30-minute class can be like $45. I don't know where in the world that happens. I know that's not happening in Charlotte all the way up to, a 30-minute class is in the hundreds. And that's a 30-minute per week class. So usually people charge by the number of hours that you take per week. Every week you're going to take a 30-minute class, which means that you have, 2 hours a month, which means that your monthly tuition is this. Kelsey, do you think you can speak a little bit to like understanding the investment value of dance? Like you're paying this money, but there's a ROI, there's a return on that investment. What do you think the return on that investment is, even for a beginner?
Yeah, I think so. Number one, I've been talking about this every class that I teach, especially since I left being full time at a studio and going in a lot of different studios. The biggest return on investment is seeing your child confident. Seeing your kid being able to walk into a room and meet new people and believe that they're capable of overcoming a challenge, learning new things, leading a group, putting themselves out there in front of people they don't know. Those are all life skills that are going to take your kid so far, regardless if they want to be a dancer, a teacher, a mom, a bakery owner. a dress designer, whatever it is that they want to do, right? We have to believe in our own potential, in our ability and capabilities. And so that I think is like the biggest thing that I see kids getting out of class. And I see them getting out of every single class, right? So definitely that. Your child is going to develop the like a team, hopefully, if they're in the right space, a team mindset, right? So everybody getting an opportunity, being able to support each other, being able to be front and center, but then also be able to learn how to be in the second row or off on the wing for part of a dance and still be supportive of those that are out. So it's being able to celebrate others without diminishing our own personal value. So I think that that's another big lesson that I try to bring into class with dancers, and I see a lot of my coworkers always also doing that same thing. So those are, I think the biggest thing is like life lessons, how to be a great person, a good teammate, supportive, encouraging, all of that I think is huge.
So, Kelsey, can beginner dancers take advanced dance classes?
In a like a broad overview, I think that an advanced dancer can take a beginner class. I don't think that it's a great idea for a beginner that doesn't have foundational knowledge to be in a more advanced class. There's so many risks to it, and not just like and not even that you're going to bring the class down because you're a beginner. That's not it at all. In my mind, it is a safety perspective. So if you don't have the proper training, body awareness, understanding of body mechanics and movement, understanding of like breath support and like how to be in a class, right? How to take class, where to stand, which group to go in. Like all of that kind of stuff is developed in those beginner foundational classes. And without that knowledge, it's going to be really hard for you to be successful in advanced class. Another thing is it's gonna be very discouraging and it's gonna be very overwhelming, and I want people to love dance, and if you go into a space that is not built for you, it can't foster that love, right? It's not made for you where you're currently at. Doesn't mean that you can't get into that advanced class. It just means you're not there yet. So there's like a process. And I'm not adverse to having like intermediate dancers take a more advanced class with the understanding of you stand in the back, you let the more advanced kids go first, you go in the last group, you follow along, find a more advanced student that like you can kind of follow and pay attention to. But definitely beginners, stay in that class and take as much as you can from it so that you can then progress through all those other classes. You'll get there when you're ready.
What I do think there is a gap that needs to be filled in the studio environment. And not every, because we definitely were successful. We had teen classes that were more beginner, intermediate, structured, and they learned beautifully and they performed beautifully. It just was a very different level than some of their peers that were a little bit more advanced or competitive. But I think there's that space as kids get into that middle school, high school age where maybe they want to try it, and dance is almost one of those things. It can feel a lot like, if I didn't start when I was 7 or 8, I'm really behind. And, are we creating spaces for these older kids that want to move their bodies and want to learn, but they also don't want to be in a class with 7-year-olds, right? Like that's also acceptable, right? So like what can we do about that? Do you think there's a happy medium there? Do you think there's a solution? I definitely do, but do you?
Yes, I think 1,000%. So when I do like teacher trainings with different studios or different organizations, I do a whole section on beginner dancers, and I really try to circle back over and over. A beginner does not mean a 3-year-old. So that's what I like say a lot. A beginner does not mean that they're little. A beginner just means they haven't done it before. So getting people to understand that, like if I went to a ballroom class, I might be 40, but I've never taken ballroom. so I need to be in a beginner class. So creating that space in your schedule, and maybe you don't have a gajillion beginner jazz classes for teens. Maybe it's, we have beginner ages 10 to 14, right? So it gives those kids that are like in that middle school, early high school age that chance to be with um, similar age kids, but also similar experience levels. Because if we put them in with the little kids, they're not going to want to take that class. And if we put them with the older kids that have more experience, they're going to feel super discouraged and like they're trying to like keep up. And we don't want that either, right? So we want to create that space. So even just throwing in one or two on your schedule, maybe it's even, and I know maybe this sounds crazy, but like maybe it's like a jazz hip hop combo class that's an hour that's for maybe some kids that are a little bit older so they can get their toe wet. But like, again, we're not with the younger kids. So it's just, you got to figure out what works in your studio. But I definitely think there's space and an opportunity for it.
And yeah, I mean, and if you're, 15 years old and you want to try ballet and jazz for the first time, absolutely do that. On the flip side, I would encourage the studio owners out there that don't have those spaces created. There, you're missing the boat on potentially, like I know when we did our teen classes, it started really small. And then I mean, they just grew and grew and grew to where we had to open more, and it just goes to show there is a total demand out there for it. You just have to offer it and be persistent with it and create a schedule that makes sense with what those kids have going on in their lives.
Absolutely, because those kids go to school and they're like, "Hey, I'm taking this fun jazz class. You want to come with me?" To their friends that also don't dance. And before you know it, you have this group of kids that are supporting and loving dance and each other and having a good time. And I think that like the fun aspect is like super important no matter what age you are.
Especially for that age starting out, like, it has to be fun, right? They don't wanna come and be yelled at, or, it be this rigorous. They're doing it to move their bodies, have fun, take a break from school, learn something new. Their goals aren't really aligned with that competitive aspect that we talk so much about on the show, which is okay, and again, there has to be spaces for that, so I love that. Why are dance studios better than learning to dance on YouTube or TikTok?
Like I said earlier, there is technique behind behind every style of dance, right? So there's hip hop technique, there's ballet technique, there's African technique, there's ballroom technique. All of these styles have a foundation and a how to um, that is going to best support you advancing through them, right? I think it's super fun to like watch a video and like learn the choreography and do it and be like, this is so much fun. I'm going to do this with my family over Christmas break. There's another thing to wanting to actually develop knowledge and appreciation for specific styles, genres, history, and I think that that is what you're going to get into a dance in a dance studio. So if you're just wanting to move and have a good time, look at a TikTok video, look up something on YouTube. If you're wanting to dive into the fundamentals of it and understanding the hows and whys, then a dance studio is the place for you.
What advice do you have from someone starting dance at any age? Like, what is your number one piece of advice?
My number one piece of advice is don't be afraid to be really bad at it. I tell I tell my students that all the time. We can't learn how to be great if we don't know what it feels like to be bad at it first. And anybody that is an expert at anything was completely clueless at that thing when they started, right? They had a passion, they had an excitement, they had a love for it, and that fostered the continual exploration and discovery and like development of that thing, and they've never stopped, and that is why they've become an expert or they have become somebody that's sought after in whatever field it is. So don't be afraid to be bad and don't be afraid to try new things, right? So like I joke all the time, I would have been a great hip hop dancer if hip hop was a thing in my day, but that was not a thing in the Midwest. But like, I should go take a hip hop class at 40 and like be okay being a complete fool in the back so that I can figure out how to do it. Right. So I think that that's the biggest thing. Don't give up on it just because you might not be great because you will be great if you keep doing it.
Perfect advice. Don't give up on it just because you're not good at it immediately. Homework time. Homework time. Kelsey's been here before, so she knows every show we give our viewers a piece of homework, one small thing that they can do to advance or learn more about this topic between this week and next week. So, Kelsey, what advice would you have someone who is Googling something about dance and they're just too embarrassed to ask? Is there a place you think that they could go or someone you think they could ask? Or what homework would you have for them?
I always was one of those people that was afraid to raise my hand or ask a question. So if you're curious about something, whether it's dance studios, dance conventions, competitions, college, an injury you might have, right? If you Google it and you get information, reach out to a dance studio that you might be looking at, reach out to a dance convention to ask for more information about what that company is or what they stand for. If you have an injury, and reach out to a respected organization that might be able to help you or guide you where you can get more information. The biggest thing is don't be afraid to reach out and ask, right? So networking is the biggest tool that you can use. So ask your kid's friend, his mom, like, oh, your daughter dances, where do you dance, what do you like about it? So just being more verbal, putting yourself out there, seeking that information. Google is great, but take that next step, right? Because Google gives you a result, and then dig into that even more. So don't be afraid to make a phone call, send an email, pop into a local business, and just start to do some more investigation for yourself.
Perfect advice. Google is great, but it is just a guide. Google is the guide. That's what I like to tell people. Google's the guide. We also have homework, the same homework that we give you every single week is to take the steps initiative. It was the impetus for this entire show and all 5 seasons. It includes free modules, free, yes, I did say free modules where you can learn anything from professionals around nutrition, medicine and science, sex abuse and prevention, gender equity, racism, all those important topics that we can all use a little bit more knowledge on are included in there. So, Kelsey, how can people get in touch with you? How can they get you, the world traveler, to come to their studio?
If you email me at kjndance@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on my Instagram, which is the same handle, kjndance. I would be happy to connect with you, answer any questions you might have. And again, if I don't have the information, trying to send you on to somebody that is more knowledgeable or an expert in that field, I am happy to do that.
You're so awesome. Thank you so much for being back here with us today, having this conversation and taking time to really answer the questions that are going to lay a foundation for so many of these people that are watching that might be scared to ask. So thank you for that, Kelsey. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I loved our chat, and I always love being a part of your events.
Thank you so much. And for those of you out there, this is Beyond the Steps. I'm Bree Zabrowski, my fabulous friend and co-host Melissa McDaniel Grisham. We love doing this every week. Thank you to Apolla Performance and Turning Point Dance Creations for making this show possible each and every week. You can find this episode, all of our episodes, on YouTube and Facebook at Apolla Performance and TP Dance Creations. Make sure you go back and watch seasons 1 through 5. You might even catch a glimpse of Kelsey on those episodes. Next week, we are right back here talking with Jennifer Milner, and we're going to have another great conversation with her. She's the founder of the Bendy Bodies podcast. Absolutely fantastic and a good friend of ours. In the meantime, share, like, comment, subscribe, all the things. You have your homework from Kelsey. You have your homework from us. And until next week, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have a wonderful weekend.